Hello and welcome everybody back to another week of Mono Black Eldrazi. I'm Conley Woods, this is TCGplayer.com, and we are wrapping up, or not wrapping up, but closing in on the finale of our Mono Black testing here. Denver is in about 10 days. We're still going to work on the list, of course, after this, although you're probably not going to see nearly as many gameplay videos. You'll probably see maybe one more week's worth if I can come up with some interesting changes and stuff to document. Otherwise, you'll simply see an updated list at the end of my traditional article. Either way, though, work will still continue on the deck, of course. But today's kind of like the brunt amount of playing and showing off where the deck is currently and sort of some of its particular matchups and getting into that. So we kind of already know all about the deck. If you're not familiar with the individual card choices en masse, then please go back and look at last week's article or the article before that on TCG Player. You can find all the videos on YouTube as well. So this week I wanted to discuss the few changes that have happened to the deck since then, as well as cover the one major matchup that I was not able to find online, strangely. But I unfortunately was not able to, so I'd like to cover that matchup a little bit verbally and walk you through it, at least kind of the general game plan, because it is the matchup that was probably changed the most by our changes to our deck. So the main changes to focus on here are that we cut Blighted Fen, which I'm a huge fan of, but we just wanted to improve our mana, specifically for sideboard cards. So cut a Blighted Fen, and we cut one Crumbling Vestige. And in their place, 2 swamps have been added. So that ups black mana probably by like 1.5 sources, I would say, because the Crumbling Vestige probably counted as half the source. So we increased our black sources by 1.5 there, which was nice. And then we also added a Pilgrim's Eye to the main deck in exchange for one of the Wasteland Stranglers. Thought process here being that we added well, we'll get to the complete discard in a second, but basically that we don't need 4 Wasteland Stranglers in that many matchups. Obviously, we would like it in a lot of the aggressive matchups, but we moved it to the sideboard, so it's still there. But I constantly wanted access to another mana, but also I don't like flooding out too much. Pilgrim's Eye is kind of like the mid solution to that. It does a lot of utility work for us. Obviously, it finds a swamp, which is big, but it also works with Ruins of Warnreef becoming a 2/2 or a 3/3 in the late game sometimes, which is nice. It jumps in a Copter, which is extremely useful, especially on curve. Playing turn 2 Copter and turn 3 Pilgrim's Eye attack is absolutely great. It also sacrifices to things like Distended Mindbender, and so it almost always came in when Distended Mindbender did anyway, but now it's in our main deck, so we don't have to worry about bringing it in, frees up some sideboard slots and stuff. So overall, I think it's pretty useful. Some talk about adding a waste to the deck has come up, but I don't think it's worth it. There's one Pilgrim's Eye, so the only situation in which you would want to waste are basically a situation where you've drawn 3 swamps, have cast a Pilgrim's Eye, and have Thought-Knot Seer or Reality Smasher or Bearer of Silence in your hand, and need a colorless mana for them and don't have one. That just seems very unlikely that you didn't draw one of these 15 colorless sources, and that you somehow drew your Pilgrim's Eye in that world, and you drew 3 swamps and are not mana screwed. So all those things coming together just seems very, very unlikely. But if you want to add a waste, I guess feel free. I would recommend against it. I moved the Spatial Contortion up to a complete disregard. This serves a couple different functions. It's another exile card for our Wasteland Stranglers. So the process of moving one Wasteland Strangler to the sideboard and adding 1 additional exile means that we're much more likely to be able to fuel all of our Wasteland Stranglers in our main deck with... I mean, not much more likely, but slightly more likely, with just another way to exile. So that's one nice addition from Spatial Contortion. But the other one is this deals with some key problematic cards, and it exiles them. The number one violator that I'm specifically thinking about is Ishkana. The Delirium active on that. Obviously, it's going to bring in some 1/2s. The 1/2s don't matter nearly as much as the 3/5. The 3/5 colds pretty much every single one of our attackers outside of Reality Smasher. And when we do somehow manage to deal with it, which we can't do with like Bearer of Silence or anything because they get so many tokens, when we do deal with it, they usually bring it back with a two cost. What is it? Grapple with the from the grapple with the past, grapple from the past. I don't know, whatever it is. Grapple with the past, I want to say, and they bring it right back and cast it again, and it's just keeps being an obnoxious threat. So complete disregard actually deals with that because it's a 3/5. Which is kind of nice. This deals with creature lands, deals with Thopter, although a little bit slower than Spatial Contortion did. But overall, I think it probably serves our specific needs a little bit better, even though Spatial Contortion definitely has plenty of advantages over Complete Disregard. So that is our main deck changes from last time. Our sideboard has gone through a lot of changes as well. I decided to add, well, obviously the 4th Wasteland Stringer came over here. That was a straight swap with the Pilgrim's Eye. Those were literally in each other's slots. The Flaying Tendrils over here, I went up to the 4th copy. I'm not 100% on playing 4 copies at Denver, but I'm inching closer and closer there, and so this is kind of a final validation of that, and get some testing in. The main thought process here is that there are so many matchups where your game 1 is, medium to medium minus. It's not a great matchup. You don't necessarily want to play it with your game 1 deck too often, but you bring in Flaying Tendrils and the entire matchup turns around, whether they're like a token strategy or just an aggressive deck, or they're the graveyard-based strategy, playing Haunted Dead and whatnot. In all those matchups, you would greatly take 4 Flaying Tendrils. You don't run them because Flaying Tendrils isn't good in a lot of matchups, but I think that turning those matchups around, which can often be a struggle in Game 1, and making them kind of shoe-ins if you do draw Flaying Tendrils, warrants all 4 copies of them. There are plenty of matchups where you only bring in 2 or 3 copies of Flaying Tendrils. You won't bring in the 4th. But the important thing is the matchups where Flaying Tendrils is the best possible card, you have access to the maximum number of them, and I think that's important. And also they enable Wasteland Strangler, and they just set up huge momentum going forward. And they're also not that difficult to cast. Really, the only land that can't cast them are Ruins of Warren Reef, Corrupted Crossroads always cast them, the 8 Swamps always cast them, Aether Hub and Crumbling Vestige will usually cast them. So it's usually pretty fine. Other changes include Titan's Presence made its way back in. I don't think it was in here in the last video. Maybe it was. But ultimately, I decided to run it instead of a second Complete Disregard. It will often act like Complete Disregard in that it hits 3-power creatures because you can reveal Matter Reshaper, Scrounger, Wasteland Strangler to it. But it also takes out some bigger things as well, namely Avacyn. Being a 4-power creature, if you reveal Thought Knot or Reality Smasher to it. So it's basically the second Complete Disregard. I could see running a Titan's Presence in the main deck, but it is a little... I don't know. It's a little less reliable in the main deck. I think it's probably a fine card. It might be even worth swapping with Complete Disregard. But I think in either world, I'm going to have one of those, either in the main deck or the sideboard, and the other one opposite it. In addition to that, we added 2 Kalitas. This is a big one, and was one of the reasons for the mana change. Again, we added Pilgrim's Eye and the 2 Swamps to the mana base, which helps out casting Kalitas quite a bit. Kalitas is great against the aggro decks, gives you a source of life gain against them. Huge against the graveyard-based decks. Pretty good against Delirium, because their creatures start getting exiled, which is actually pretty helpful against them. So you can actually bring this in against Delirium. Just because the exile specifically there. But great against most aggro decks, great against all the graveyard-based decks. I'm not certain 2 copies is correct. I think 1 copy may be correct, but it's one of those things where in order to really tell if a card's good, playing a second one is kind of helpful. So trying out 2 copies of it right now. The same logic sort of applies for Lost Legacy. A lot of people have been suggesting this for a while, and I haven't been the biggest fan because most of the combo decks in Standard whiff on this. So all the Dynavolt Tower decks, it can't hit Dynavolt Tower itself. It can't hit Marvelworks against the Marvelworks decks, although we can name Emrakul against them and soften the blow quite a bit and weaken it. So you still will bring this card in against them, but it doesn't hit the premier card. It can't hit Metalwork Colossus against the Colossus deck. It can't hit... There's one other deck that I thought of... well, irrelevant, but it can't hit every one of these problematic cards out of the combo decks. Otherwise, it would kind of be a shoo-in as a solution against them. But what it does do is it hurts Delirium quite a bit. Taking out Ishkanah is the big one. As I said, we already kind of have a problem with it. It's probably the most annoying card for us in that matchup, actually, more annoying than Emrakul, because Emrakul gets hit by Harsh Scrutinies and Transgress the Minds pretty easily because it sits in the hand so long, but Ishkanah does not, so Lost Legacy is pretty good there. Of course, you can name Emrakul with Lost Legacy if it comes up, but it's not 100% necessary, whereas Ishkanah is kind of public enemy #1 in that particular matchup. So I'm giving this a shot mostly for Black-Green Delirium, but it comes in plenty of other places. Plenty of control matchups that have a lot of counter magic and or wrath effects that you are trying to snag. It's good against counterspell specifically because they something like Ceremonious Rejection, for example, can't counter this, but you can snag it from under their hand. So just a lot of use. I could see this again going down as a one of. I'm trying to right now over Pick the Brain. Pick the Brain is just a generic addition to Transgress the Mind, but Lost Legacy allows you to name a card that isn't in your opponent's hand, which is clutch because I get to find out what's in my opponent's hand so easily with all these cards to look at their hand. So I get to know whether I need to name something that's in their hand or name something else. And Lost Legacy lets me know that. It lets me see, hey, he's got 2 copies of this card. Let me set up Lost Legacy for that, or whatever it may have you. So trying 2 copies of that, trying 2 copies of Cletus. That's a lot more black in my sideboard, which is why the main deck changes to the mana occurred. Like I said, we basically added 1.5 black sources to the mana base, and then we also added Pilgrim's Eye, which is another black source essentially. It should be helping out quite a bit. I could see potentially going as far as 1 more further black source. I don't think I'd go beyond that, but I could see getting 1 more Crumbling Vestige for 1 swamp. So far, I have decided that it's not worth it, but it's something I'm considering. And then the important swap to pay attention to is Complete Disregard and Titan's Presence. I'll pay attention to that during our testing. But otherwise, the sideboard's shaping up pretty good. I'm definitely keeping the 2 Mind Benders. I'm certainly keeping the Harsh Scrutiny and probably Liliana. I think she's proven herself. Likely Reality Smasher and likely some removal spell here. Definitely the 4th Wasteland Strangler. Certainly 3 Flaying Tendrils, almost certainly 4. And then we'll try out the Kalidas and Lost Legacy, but I expect them to be pretty good. So yeah, for the Delirium matchup specifically, which is the one that I was not able to find online, I got 5 matches recorded that span a lot of different decks, combo decks and mid-range decks and Blue-White Flash and stuff. But Delirium I couldn't find online, which is a little frustrating considering that it did so well at the last tournament. But your Delirium matchup is honestly quite strong if you were to remove Ishkanah from the equation. They don't have many things that are actually punishing you. They can get a great starter course and beat you just like they can in any deck. When I say you have a great matchup, I'm not talking about like 90% or something. That just doesn't exist in Standard. But you're going to win 60 or 65% of the games in which Ishkanah doesn't show up, which is great for you. Games in which Ishkanah show up, it either swings to a negative game for you, or an even game for you, or sometimes a negative game for you. So that's kind of the #1 card. Obviously, only when it's Deliriumed, and it gives you problems because it happens to dodge your Wasteland Stranglers, it dodges your Bearer of Silence. It blocks every single one of your creatures outside of Reality Smasher, usually Reality Smasher as well because of the 1/2. So it's just a scary card. Sky Sovereign gives you a little bit of power there because you can attack with a Sky Sovereign, shoot down one of the 1/2s, and if you're able to deal with any of the other 1/2s, now you can potentially get in. But for the most part, it's a scary situation, and the best thing you can do against it is Transgress the Mind, Ishkanah, or Thought Not Seer it. Putting it in the graveyard with Harsh Scrutiny isn't even a solution necessarily because they could just rebuy it eventually. So that's where cards like Lost Legacy and Kalidas come into play. It's once we do deal with this Ishkanah, like let's make sure it is done. Like I don't want it coming back. I don't ever want to deal with it again. Lost Legacy cuts it out, its 8 legs out from underneath it before it gets the ability to do so. But we're specifically kind of changing our sideboard to fight Black-Green Delirium. I'm really happy with our Blue-White Flash matchup. They can certainly win. They're a very powerful deck. Not going to give you an illusions like we just crush them because we don't. But I do feel favor against Blue-White Flash. And I do feel that if you pilot the deck well and you get a reasonable draw, you're going to win more games than you're going to lose, which is all you can really ask for. If you were playing Blue-White Flash against Blue-White Flash, you would expect a 50-50 ratio, maybe slightly better if you're a really good player. But I do expect this to actually be better against Blue-White Flash than a Blue-White Flash deck would be. So there's that. So really, after that, you're kind of focused on Black-Green Delirium as Public Enemy number 2. Most of the aggro decks that are Public Enemy number 3 in the running for Public Enemy number 3 at least, Red-White Vehicles, Red-Green Energy, all the aggressive decks. There's multiple like red tokeny strategies and stuff. There's all kinds of weird stuff out there, but you're pretty favored against them post board. Game 1, you're usually fine. You have a lot of removal. You have a lot of 1-for-1 stuff. You even have some 2-for-1 stuff. But the problem is you don't block too well, and you don't come back from behind all that well because you don't have much life gain. But post board, you bring in your Kalidases, you bring in your Flaying Tendrils, and you just have all this way to catch back up and a lot more 2-for-1 action. And so you're generally favored against aggro. So really, the thing to kind of focus on at this point, at least in my mind, is making sure we tune up that Delirium matchup and get it perfect. And so the last-minute Lost Legacies, and even to a lesser extent Kalidas. Kalidas is in here mostly for aggro and the graveyard-based like Haunted Dead decks, but it does come in against Delirium just because of how valuable it is, and it blocks Ishkanah and does stuff like that. Yeah, so I think basically this is kind of the last minute tuning to make sure those matchups are reasonable. The complete disregard and the Titan's presence are also Ishkanah adds, or nods at least. And then Emrakul itself, we can take out with all of our hand removal and our Lost Legacy. So pretty happy with all of the way that turns out. Our mid-range matchups are probably my favorite. We usually tend to crush there unless they get some crazy draw. Our control matchups are easily our best matchup, the slow control decks where they just don't have a hand and we just have aggressive creatures non-stop that are very difficult to deal with. But there tends to not be too much really complete stall, do-nothing control, and the reason why is Blue-White Flash beats up on that deck. So I'm not expecting a lot of that, although you do beat up on it very, very well. So everything else I'm feeling really, really confident about. Again, you can lose. I'm not going to tell you should play this in a tournament and you're going to go 10-0 or whatever, but you have favorable matchups where it counts, and as soon as we can get that Black Room Delirium matchup fine-tuned, I think we'll be in the perfect spot. I honestly think Lost Legacy is the route there. People kept telling me to play Lost Legacy for other reasons, and I've never found it compelling. Dealing with Emrakul with Lost Legacy is not compelling, but at least for me, it's something we can do, but it was not a problem we were having. The real true problem is the Spider, and so if we can deal with the Spider, I feel great about that matchup. And anybody that's been testing this deck and has played against Black Green Delirium, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So yeah, for Mono Black Eldrazi, let's play some games. I am Conley Woods, TCG player. Thanks for hanging out with me for the last couple weeks, and let's continue the show. We'll be right back.